He gave up the shield, not because he was tired, but because he believed the world was ready for something new. He believed that ideals could outlive the man who carried them, that a symbol could evolve with time, that the people would honor the spirit more than the silhouette. But the world has a way of holding on to comfort, even when it means letting go of truth. There was a weight in that legacy, forged in war, scarred by loss, polished by propaganda. Steve Rogers didn't just wear the stars and stripes, he wore history itself, a living contradiction, a soldier who questioned orders, a patriot who defied power. He wasn't perfect, but he was trusted, because he never lied about who he was. When Sam Wilson stepped forward, the silence was louder than applause. The hesitation wasn't about his courage, or his strength. It was about the mirror he held up to a nation that wanted a ghost, not a man. He didn't come from myth, he came from reality, and reality is harder to cheer for. He flew without enhancements, without backing, without the permission of a world still clinging to yesterday. And in that defiance, in that unwavering presence, he became something rare. A hero with no mask, no serum, no safety net. Just conviction and consequence. But conviction is heavy when carried alone, and consequence is cruel when misunderstood. Sam didn't just inherit the shield. He inherited the burden of living up to a memory the world refuses to let die, and every step he takes forward echoes against the walls of a country unsure if it still wants to be saved. In this video, we're going to explore why no one will ever truly replace Steve Rogers. Not because Sam Wilson is unworthy, but because America itself has changed too much to accept him. We'll break down the myth, the man, the message, and the movement behind the mantle. And why Sam's greatest battle isn't against villains, but against the very idea of what Captain America was supposed to be. There was a time when the shield meant something more than just a symbol. It was a promise that truth mattered, that honor still had a place in a world falling apart, that if you stood behind that shield, you would never be alone. Steve Rogers carried that promise like a burden, not because he wanted to, but because he believed someone had to. He didn't chase fame, he didn't crave glory. He simply couldn't ignore the weight of doing nothing. When Steve stepped forward, the world listened. Not because he shouted, but because he lived the values people claimed to believe in. He was calm in chaos, brave in silence, unshakable even when the ground beneath him cracked. The moment he handed Sam the shield, we hoped history would repeat itself. We wanted to believe that the legacy could be passed like a torch, that the symbol would carry the same power, that the new Captain America would rise with the same gravity. But symbols only hold the weight we give them, and maybe, just maybe, the world had already stopped believing in what that shield once meant. Sam Wilson stepped into a battlefield already lost, not of war, but of perception. The moment he wore the stars and stripes, he became a target, not for enemies abroad, but for judgment at home. Whispers behind closed doors, stares that never needed words. He was too different, too new, too unfamiliar to be the heir of an ideal so tightly woven into the past. The very thing that made Steve special now made Sam suspect, because Steve represented a version of America people still wanted to believe in. Sam represented the one they wanted to ignore. He didn't have a serum, didn't come from war, didn't crash a plane to save the world. He came from struggle, from streets, from a place that doesn't get statues or celebrations. He came with truth, and truth makes people uncomfortable. Every speech he gave, every life he saved, every moment he tried to rise above the noise got louder. Not because he failed, but because people were never really listening. They just wanted the illusion of Captain America, not the reality of one. Sam didn't break the legacy, the world did, piece by piece, with every time they looked at the man holding the shield and saw everything but the heart behind it. There's a sadness in watching someone carry something they never asked for. Sam didn't chase the mantle. He inherited a burden disguised as a gift, a legacy carved from battles and blood and impossible expectations. He watched Steve walk away, not just from the shield, but from the entire weight of its meaning. And yet Sam stood still, not because he believed he could replace him, but because he knew someone had to try. But in every headline, every protest, every moment of silence that followed his rise, he felt the sting of being compared. Not for what he did, but for what he could never be. The ghost of Steve Rogers lingered in every shadow. Even his triumphs were weighed down by doubt. The lives he saved didn't erase the questions. The respect he earned never filled the void, because what people really wanted was to turn back time, to when the shield felt easier to believe in. And that's the cruelest part. Not that Sam failed, but that no one ever gave him the space to become something different, something honest, something his own. Still, there's something beautiful in the way he stood anyway. He held the shield not for glory, but because no one else would. In a time when heroes are marketed, managed, manipulated. He showed up with scars and silence. He wasn't trying to be Steve. He was trying to be enough. And somehow, in all that quiet resistance, he became more than a successor. He became a symbol of what heroism actually looks like now. Not myth, not legend, but humanity, real choices, real consequences, real pain. And through it all, he never let go of the weight in his hands. Because some weights aren't meant to be dropped, only carried with purpose. Sam stood before the world as it truly is, fractured, defensive, uncertain. And he didn't flinch, because his strength wasn't in his body, it was in his conviction. In his choice to keep walking when the road offered no praise. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of Captain America we need now. One who doesn't demand loyalty, but earns it through truth. There's still time to see him clearly, not as a copy, but as a creation. Not as a placeholder, but as a pillar. Someone who took a legend and turned it into a lifeline. Someone who said, I know what this world looks like, and I still believe in it. He carries that belief like a shield no one sees, but everyone feels. Sam's story isn't just a chapter in Steve's legacy. It's a mirror held up to a nation too afraid to face itself. He reminds us that progress isn't clean. It's messy, loud, uncomfortable, but necessary. Every time he steps forward, he pulls the future with him. And even when the world pushes back, even when it whispers doubt into his ears, he stands firm. Not because he believes he'll win, but because he believes the fight matters. He walks into resistance with open hands and an open heart. That's what makes him worthy. Not the suit, not the shield, but the choice. The daily choice to do better. Even when no one's watching. Even when no one says thank you. That kind of strength doesn't shine. It endures. In Sam, we see a hero for this moment. Not the past. Not the fantasy, but the now. A man who became Captain America, not because the world accepted him, but because he chose to accept the world anyway. He is hope in motion, never loud, but never lost. And yet, for all his effort, all his sacrifice, Sam may never be what Steve was. Not because he's lacking, but because the myth of Steve Rogers was never built for someone like him to inherit. The blueprint was written for a different time, a different audience, a different truth. The country changed, the dream fractured, and in that fracture, the shield became a relic. Something people remember fondly, but refuse to truly trust again. Not when it's held by someone who challenges comfort. People don't want to be awakened. They want to be reassured. Sam became a symbol of what America is, not what it pretends to be. And that truth is painful, because people don't want mirrors. They want fairy tales. And Sam's reality is too raw to romanticize. It cuts too close to what we all try to ignore. So he stands alone, in the crowd, above the noise, within the silence, carrying a legacy that was never made to carry him back, only forward, into something new, something uncertain. He is both the answer and the question, unresolved by choice. And maybe that's the tragedy, that the perfect successor to Captain America is already here, but the world isn't ready to see him, because the world still clings to a ghost in a time that demands something real. And until that changes, Sam will bleed for a dream he may never be allowed to embody.